On the 8th of March 2014, Malaysian Airlines flight MH370 took off from Kuala Lumpur International Airport bound for Beijing with 239 people on board. Less than an hour into the flight, radio contact was lost and the plane vanished from air traffic controllers' radar screens. Only later it was discovered that Malaysian military radar had continued to track the plane as it veered westwards across the Malay Peninsula, then northwest up the Straits of Malacca towards Andaman Sea. Eventually, sophisticated analysis of the satellite communication from the plane's automated systems indicated that it had then turned southwards and the search moved to the South Indian Ocean. One piece of debris, a flaperon broken off from the wing, washed up on the French island of Réunion, some 2,500 miles west of the search area, on the 29th of July 2015. Since then, other small pieces of the wreckage that might have come from the wings and engine of the missing aircraft have been found along the coast of East Africa, where oceanographers said the currents would have carried debris from the search area. However, a search of the sea floor where the plane was supposed to have crashed lasted 3 years and costed $130 million, could find no sign of the huge fuselage of the Boeing 777, and if the plane had broken up or impact, how come none of the debris you would expect to float, the seat cushions, life jackets, luggage, even corpses, had ended up floating in the sea? This has spawned all sorts of conspiracy theories, from a hijacking gone wrong to pilot suicide, an accidental shoot-down, alien abduction, and even that it had been substituted for MH370, shot down over the Ukraine 3 months later. One of the most intriguing came from aviation expert Jeff Wise, who led CNN's coverage of the disappearance of MH370. It centered on the fact that 20 employees of Freescale Semiconductors, an avionics firm said to specialize in stealth technology, were on board. Wise noted that the plane was initially assumed to have flown north from the Andaman Sea, and Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak had appealed to the President of Kazakhstan, formerly First Secretary of the Communist Party of Kazakhstan, and an ally of Vladimir Putin, to allow Malaysia to set up a search in Kazakhstan. Only later was it thought that the plane had travelled south to crash into the sea in one of the remotest spots on Earth. Re-examining the satellite data, Wise and the independent group, a band of like-minded aviation experts, decided that the plane had indeed flown north, while bogus data had been fed to the satellite. Checking the passenger list, he found that 2 Ukrainians and a Russian were on board. Little was known about them, except that the Ukrainians come from Odessa, a former Soviet naval base, and the Russian's hobby was scuba diving. He was sitting up front in business class, with the 2 Ukrainians further back in economy. Wise reckons that the Russian came onto the plane with a bag of scuba gear containing 3 full-face diving masks. Once the plane had reached cruising altitude and the cabin staff were looking the other way, he slipped into the electronics and equipment, or EEB, which on the Boeing 777 could be accessed through a hatch at the front of the first-class cabin. From there, he could control all the systems on the plane. First, he would have cut off all the communications, then plugged in portable equipment that would upload false satellite data to the system. From the EEB, he could depressurize the cabin while he and his two accomplices breathed oxygen through their diving masks. As he turned the plane to the west, the flight crew would have spotted that something was wrong, but there would have been nothing they could do about it. None of their checklists would have covered a possible hijacking from the EEB. The anti-hijacking lock on the cockpit door could also be controlled from there. When it was open, two burly men wearing oxygen masks entered, giving the hijackers total control of the plane. While the crew and passengers lapsed into unconsciousness, the plane flew across the Malay Peninsula along the Malaysian-Thai border, where it was unlikely that anyone would be looking out for a rogue aircraft. Then the plane turned again and flew up the straits of Malacca between Thailand and Indonesia. Instead of turning southwards, Wise reckons the flight MH370 continued northwards to Kazakhstan, sending its last electronic handshake to the satellite near the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, which is leased by Russia to launch the rockets supplying the space station. Baikonur had a runway nearly 15,000 feet long, built to land the Buran spaceplane, the Soviet Union's version of the space shuttle, whose program was cancelled in 1993. This is the only airstrip in the world built specifically for self-landing airplanes, and the 777 had an auto-landing system. That meant that even someone who had no experience flying commercial aircraft could land the plane safely. However, Baikonur is in the middle of a flat, treeless plain, a difficult place to hide something as big as the Boeing 777, and the hijackers would have had just 90 minutes to hide it before the sun came up. Studying satellite imagery, Wise noted that a huge building at Bucknell, which had been left to rot after the Buran project had been abandoned, had recently been demolished. Where it had been, there was now a large patch around the size of a 777, covered with rubble where the plane could have been hidden. Wise says he can offer no motive for the hijacking. However, both during the Vietnam War and World War II, the Soviets seized American and Allied prisoners who had specialized technical knowledge. If the cabin had been repressurized after the hijackers had taken over the plane, the 20 employees of Freescale could now be producing the latest stealth cloaking systems for the Russians.